So there's no doubting just how rampant the fangame scene is regarding Five Nights at Freddy's. I mean, with such a simple base formula, fan tributes and projects exploding in popularity alongside the original games themselves was and still is an inevitability. Of course, among that first wave of, let's face it, FNAF clones, as most of them were back in late 2014, one of them had to come first. I don't know if we'll ever truly figure out which was the very first. Maybe the first true fangames never gained enough popularity to really break ground, or after such a long time, ended up wiped from the internet altogether. But hey, take one of the most popular Disney creepypastas, shove it into that good old FNAF template, and it's probably close enough to earning that title. Five Nights at Treasure Island. While this is considered to be the very first FNAF fangame by many, I think it's a much safer assumption to call this the first popular fangame. For a tribute based on a game that released just 4.5 months after the game it was based on, it hit it pretty big among the community and Let's Players alike. And to this day, I don't know why. I mean, nothing's particularly amazing about this game other than it being based on a good old internet campfire story, and as novel as that is, I could make a fangame based on Thomas the Sodding Tank Engine and it'd probably blow up, so that is sorta kinda meaningless in this context. Yeah, exactly. So despite this thing looking and feeling pretty on par with a lot of other fairly mediocre tributes at the time, Five Nights at Treasure Island peaked for one reason or another. Will we figure out why? Is there some insanely gratifying secret to this thing to uncover?
Hey, maybe if you reviewed it, you'd find out.
I'm building up to the shut the fuck. Five Nights at Treasure Island, a basic-ass title screen with a basic-ass font accompanied by that strangely iconic radio interface ambience is what greets us, and, well, this is a Five Nights at Freddy's inspired Abandoned by Disney creepypasta based game, alright? Here's a quick rundown for context. Abandoned by Disney is a creepypasta. I don't know, listing basic 2 clause facts is a hobby of mine. Alright, it's an, albeit short, pretty entertaining legend surrounding the abandoned, you guessed it, Treasure Island. Now that there's no lie, Disney did in fact construct and later decommission Treasure Island, quite infamously in fact. While it was technically renamed to Discovery Island later in its life, discounting all the clear paranormal activity, it was a legitimate thing, but was shut down for a publicly undisclosed reason. You can go take a gander at the surprisingly decently written original read if you want the details. I'm not gonna sit here and spoil it all. What I will spoil, however, is the ending. You ready? The protagonist finds a seemingly totally untouched mascots-only area, in contrast to the reasonable decay and foliage overgrowth of Mowgli's palace, a structure supposedly to have been unveiled if not for the closure of the park. He fumbles around for a while until he eventually finds a character prep room lined with cartoon mascot costumes. And all's fine and dandy till he yonks one of the prosthetic Donald Duck heads off the wall and... Oh, and then a color-inverted Mickey Mouse costume props itself up from the middle of the room and rips its own head off, spurting chunky yellow blood everywhere. Now, while a story about a white mouse leaking mac and cheese out of its neck isn't the most conventional setting for a horror game, it is still one of the most well-known creepypastas out there. Combining that with the new hot fad of the mid-2010s, let's just say maybe there's some good reasoning as to why this thing blew up the way it did. Doesn't say shit about the quality of the game though, we're in for a slow ride. Well, bringing us past this funky-looking render of photo-negative Michael with some mint coming out of his esophagus to the menu screen, this is just a demo. Yep, the full game was never released, and while the first demo was thrown up on DeviantArt by Anart 1996 on December 1st, 2014, I have here the second and final demo, uploaded on the 13th. The download to this game was lost for a little while though, until Cool Chris 20007's dope ass dropped a comment containing a link to it, so my guy, thank you. Surprisingly, between showing this off both a couple of minutes and about 10 seconds ago and right now, not much has changed on the title screen here. Sitting here for a few minutes does something funny though, watch.
Wanna see my head come off?
I haven't touched a button and I'm pissing my pants already. First night, first impressions, and yep, this is about exactly what you'd expect from the words at Nights Freddy's fangame and 5 in no particular order. It's pretty basic presentation-wise is what I'm getting at, there's no beating around the bush here. As is painfully standard, the game opens to a phone call with an instructor explaining the way the mechanics to you. Nothing new here. He explains that we're here to collect data, whatever the hell that means, that he's fully aware about the paranormal photo-negative Mickey costume that walks around and kills people, that the fire exits to the left, you know, standard safety procedure rundown garbo. Except he's kind of a dick. I don't know, he's just kind of mean about it all for no reason, referring to me like you look like someone who doesn't care. I mean, I'm the one critically reviewing the demo for a cancelled Five Nights at Freddy's fangame based on a Disney World creepypasta, so I'd beg to differ. What isn't so standard here though is the lack of lights and doors, two crucial mechanics to the original Five Nights at Freddy's, which, okay, I'll give it that. Treasure Island went ahead with attempting to innovate a little, especially with the copious amounts of fangames at the time doing nothing but copying the door mechanic. The one mechanic the game does have though is underwhelming underwhelming to say the least. Imagine the core mechanic in Five Nights at Freddy's 3. Your primary objective is to lure Springtrap to the room furthest away from you with an audio cue, but he might not always run straight to that room, you might get an audio error, the cameras might shut themselves off, preventing you from seeing him, the ventilation might make you hallucinate and cause you to lure a Springtrap that isn't really there. There are factors to be considered when dealing with him. Now imagine all that stripped down to the absolute bare minimum. Mick is in your office, boom, piss on out of here. You're able to shut the cameras off to produce a sound in the same room relatively somehow, and this brings him straight back to his starting point. It really is as basic as you can get. Not to mention how long the nights drag on for, nearly 10 minutes a pop. It's unnecessarily drawn out, especially for how much actually happens over the course of each night. There are other costumes propped around the facility too. You got photo negative Mickey in the Donald Duck head as described in the creepypasta, and armless Oswald the Lucky Rabbit suit shoved behind a crate here, Goofy's chilling out over here like a little log of ass waste, and barely any of them pose any kind of a threat. Mickey walked into my office twice and I saw Oswald on like 2 cameras that he isn't supposed to be on, and that's about it. The only other character that ever interacted with me was Donald, who just decided to spawn on my desk accompanied by the most awesome sound effect on repeat. Hell yeah! I don't even know what his mechanic is to create a stronger audio lure for Mickey to reach my office faster. I mean, with all things considered, he's doing me a favor with how slow the gameplay is here. There is a second night here though, just kidding, everything I just described happened on the second night. Night 1 was like night 2, except nothing happened at all ever. Night 2 does give us a phone call from somebody completely new, which is something you don't often see in traditional fan games, but even then it feels totally forced and serves no real point as a feature. I'm guessing in the full game this might have had lore purpose, or would have worked better as an elaborated part of the experience, but in a 2-night demo it feels totally pointless. Visually things still aren't that great, though at least the office and cameras are consistently decorated, emitting a fairly roundabout abandoned feeling. Yes, the game based on an abandoned complex feels abandoned, go figure. But god, it's pretty amateur. If you're familiar with the 3D modeling and animating software Blender, well, sometimes for better or for worse, it's quick and easy to tell what's been used for rendering out assets. It's all the default roughness maps with super basic point lamps to light the scenes, a lack of any form of texturing on some materials. It's a simple to use program, but that doesn't necessarily translate to people particularly taking full advantage of that. That's me critiquing the visuals in the context of modern day 2021 though, before Fangame devs really began sinking their time into these things. So by late 2014 standards, I mean, yeah, it's alright. It uses that same goddamn font every fangame at the time seemed to use, and there are a few visual quirks here and there that give it that cute early FNAF fangame charm, but it's difficult to call it very visually pleasing. Talk about the color palettes used here, washed out greens and rusted browns. I mean, they can work well when they're implemented correctly, but as a confused zoologist incorrectly identifying a ram would say, ew. And if we're speaking more generally here, there's a certain level of, I don't know, fangame quirk that seemed so ever present around this era of fan content. The scroll detection that allowed you to look around the office is pretty jank. Flicking your mouse down to toggle the camera view doesn't temporarily remove the trigger, so if you overestimate your mouse position and bring it back up, it'll open the cameras again. You can manually scroll left and right through the cameras. I know I'm nitpicking here, but as revered as this thing is in the hearts of many when this thing came out and showed off that people could in fact adopt the FNAF formula into something fan-made, it really doesn't stand the test of time in my opinion. And it's not like this is something that I think was really needed to have been spelled out to any of you. It's a clearly dated game. It's not even finished, but while it's easy to critically shit on this experience as a game, there's no denying that it's interesting to document and view this thing as a relic of its time. Fangames at this point were still going through those growing pains where all people really had to work off of were the first and second games, and while you might imagine this left far more up to the imagination of the developer, people wanted their ideas out there, and brainstorming entirely new scenarios and mechanics purely for the sake of differentiation isn't something I think was a concept at the forefront of many people's minds when it came to them just wanting to show off some goofy or interesting approach to the series. Something simple like removing the doors and lights from FNAF 1 is actually something I can get behind, and while the substitution for those mechanics is a little too basic and underdeveloped for my tastes here, later fangames did show far more potential. This was an era of fangame developers figuring things out, only really needing to tweak what was already there in order to produce a fangame that met the par of quality most people found, at the very least, acceptable. Five Nights at Warriors, One Night at Flumpties, Five Nights at Candies, these were incredibly popular fangames released in early 2015, the latter two functionally barely doing anything to distinguish from Five Nights at Freddy's 1. Hell, these games are literally almost identical. The core mechanical change, removing the windows and forcing you to open the doors to check if anyone's outside. But it was the presentation of the rest of the experience that set these games apart from the garbage, low-effort joke games that anybody with a Click Team license could spit out no problem. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that FNAF fangames are incredibly incredibly original experiences, because most of them sure goddamn aren't. A lot of the fan games I've covered, even ones that I've praised, a lot of them copy a lot from each other and the original games. And while in a good amount of cases, this actually isn't an issue due to how recycled mechanics and ideas can be transformed and remixed into a new experience, nothing's gonna stop GameJolt hosting copious amounts of Unreal Engine free roam tributes. And that's the kind of thing I always want to consider when bringing up content from 6 years ago. Anyway, deviating from the focus of the video, don't worry about it, it's just a hobby of mine. Five Nights at Treasure Island, well, yes, it has that charm and that nostalgia factor for some. It doesn't hold up too well, and even as a demo, it's not the most compelling thing I've ever played. While basing a fan game on an existing spooky concept is novel and can work well, it just misses the mark here, not necessarily in terms of staying true to the source material, rather taking what made that source material scary in the first place and translating that into an interactive experience. But it's not like there wasn't more planned for it. Here's a render of what I'm assuming would have been the ultimate cast of characters you would have faced off against, and the idea of introducing several people over the phone calls, maybe serving a purpose for functionality, maybe having story significance. That is a neat idea. I haven't seen explored or elaborated upon anywhere else, unless you want to get the duo of Phone Dude and Phone Guy in FNAF 3, though that was obviously barely character interaction at all. And I don't know if this is just me, but Treasure Island's, I don't know, always given off this strangely eerie aura to me. Something that feels a lot deeper than what's ever been shown off at face value. Yep, this is one strange ass game. It's hardly a good game, but it was the first truly big fan tribute to such an innovative series. And maybe for that reason alone is why I still see it appreciated to this very day. But it'd be interesting to see what could have been if this project was stuck with for the long haul, right? Yeah, with such a popular cancelled fan game from 6 years ago, what do you think happened? Oh hell yeah, an entirely new development team across the span of several years took that initial promise of something cool, that spark of hope the original fan project delivered, and ran with it to create a full spiritual successor to that original demo, released on November 28th, 2020, just 2 days shy of the 6-year anniversary of the first demo of the original game. From the GameJolt screenshots alone, I mean, this doesn't look half bad at all. A bigger map, more cameras, even looks like you can roam the facility yourself, well, as far as free roaming a 2D game engine will get you. This looks solid. And this is something I definitely want to check out, hunting for everything that was borrowed from the original game, seeing what was tweaked, improved, carried over. Man, I love these. For now though, it'll always be entertaining to look back on the backlog of old attempts at creating something that would stand out from the crowd, an FNAF fan game that had set itself aside from the rest. And while I don't think we'll ever see ourselves in a frenzy of fan developers pushing out games in the same way as once was, I'll always look back fondly on those who did, for trying out ideas purely for the fun of experimentation. But hey, who knows, maybe a new iteration of the thing, despite lacking the iconic jank of the original, could turn out to be the definitive way to experience